Liza P is a very strong entrant into the Souls-like pantheon. Probably the best one not made by FromSoft themselves. It's definitely not for everyone. I personally was pretty negative on this game during my first playthrough, and still am to some extent. But something I very rarely complained about was the bosses. The boss lineup is extremely strong in this game. Almost perfect, in fact, if they didn't get overly ambitious and try to make a kind of encounter that's always trash into something that's not trash. In case you can't tell, they failed there, and then they put it in twice. But we'll get to that in a minute. Regardless, coming out of nowhere with a Souls-like and having a better hit rate with your bosses than FromSoft in most of their games is definitely a strong first showing, and I'm very much looking forward to this game's inevitable DLC. But for now, we have what we have, and here's what I think of it. I don't know who told the developers that Souls fans love gank fights so much that not only should one be a main boss, but the same one should appear as a main boss twice, but this person I just made up should be considered nothing less than a corporate saboteur. And not only is this a gank fight, but it's doubtlessly one of the worst gank fights I've ever experienced in a Souls-like. This is a fight where you begin against 3 bosses, with one being active at any given time. And this idea of having one active boss is a good idea to base a gank fight on theory, but they didn't go hard enough on it, not even close. The active boss is not aggressive enough, and the inactive ones aren't passive enough. The active one will often spend upwards of 5 seconds at a time just sitting around with their friends in the back, wasting time you could be spending building damage on them. And the inactive ones will start doing melee attacks on you if you step within a country mile of you. And once they're on you, they stick on you like goddamn glue. And even when the fight is going as intended, with you contending the active one while the others provide support, it's still miserable, as the inactive ones are constantly throwing fucking rocks at you like monkeys, which stagger you and chunk your health if you're lucky, or pull you across the entire arena, and stick the 2 inactive bosses on you if you're not. This means half the time you get yourself a punish window. Hey, guess what, chucklefuck? You actually didn't. By the way, I haven't even mentioned that taking a single hit from the active boss slaps you with a status effect, either killing your entire Fable bar, forcing you to repair your weapon while a pack of monkeys is harassing you, or just dealing damn near your entire health bar and damage over a short time. And I still haven't mentioned that there's a fucking 4th boss who comes out after you kill 2 of them. Yes, 2. Meaning you have to goof around making sure the last remaining of the 3 has the low health when you kill the second, so you have time to kill them while the last one's spawning. And if you don't, well, you might as well put the controller down. Because on top of all of this, even on its own, the 4th boss is one of the more overwhelming boss phases of the game, eclipsing most previous standalone bosses, as well as the first phases of the game's remaining 3 bosses. There's actually a lot more I have to say about this fight, but I'm going to leave it here, because this is already the longest section of the damn script. There's so much miserable shit in this fight that I literally can't, in good conscience, mention all of it, because it would take so much time. Here, I'll put a screenshot from the script of the rest of the bullshit that I tacked down at the end. You can pause if you want, but I'm moving on. I never used a Spectre a single time in either of my playthroughs, except to get this out of the way on my second go after I got all the footage I wanted, so I can move on with my goddamn life. I'm not gonna talk about this one too much, since it's rather similar to the other instance of this encounter. It's basically the same fight played in reverse. The main boss spawns immediately, with the other 3 spawning each time you take off a quarter of his health. Mercifully, there are no status effects here, which is the main reason I'm putting it in front of the second one. The fight does also end after you kill the main boss, meaning you don't necessarily have to contend with the other 3, but, well, good luck with that. I'm sure by the time I'm done with this video, some dude named Melvin will have concocted some strategy guide like, oh, well, if you use this handle with this scaling and this blade at level 69, and then put up, right, left, down, start at a specific time, then you kill him every time before any of them spawn. Shut up. Anyway, boss's ass. Next. This spot denotes a significant increase in boss quality over the previous two. That being said, still not a fan of this guy. In Phase 1, he's got this overhead smash that hits pretty hard. It comes out so fast that you can't punish whatever he did before, so you basically have to gamble on every attack you take in this fight. Also, his charge attack punishes aggression even harder by forcing you to keep your distance whenever you can line up an attack, since you can't make enough sideways distance to avoid it if you're already in his face when he starts winding it up. And I don't know if I'm just ass, but I could never parry this. Tried many times. Anyway, Phase 2 ups the shittiness by starting with a transition that fills the arena with dot inflicting fire except in specific locations, the pattern of which I could never figure out. He also gains several ranged attacks, which he relentlessly spams whenever you're out of range, making it even more difficult to get back into range, since they also make him dance around like a ballerina. And he also likes to randomly use them even when you're right in his face, starting the chase all over again. And of course, he also does the phase transition move again if you don't kill him fast enough. Fighting this guy overall just feels like playing against the most annoying character in a fighting game. This guy is not so bad, but I'm definitely not a fan of this fight. It puts together two things that I'm personally not big on in my Souls-like boss fights. I don't like bosses whose attack patterns can be accurately described as flopping around, which is most of what Phase 1 is. And I don't like bosses who have a very lengthy fight and then cast their ult when you're like 75% of the way through, which is what happens halfway through Phase 2 with his extremely difficult fire attack. That attack is so difficult to deal with that I genuinely think the best way to handle it is to just keep doing attempts until one time you get lucky and stagger him out of it while he's cranking his hog, which completely cancels it and makes it so he won't attempt to do it again. That's where my complaints end, though. It's definitely not a terrible boss. Out of the ones I consider bad, I dislike this one the least. Alright, that's all the ones I don't like out of the way. I like all the bosses from here on out. This guy's just here because he's very basic, which is good. First bosses should be basic. You just don't usually make it high on tier lists for that reason, when compared to the showstoppers that developers have the freedom to put later in the game. Anyway, I like this guy. Just disappointed that his head mace wasn't his boss weapon. I was surprised to find myself putting this boss so low considering how much I liked it, but that's just a testament to the quality of the rest of the lineup, and not me saying I don't like him that much. But this fight does have some noticeable flaws in my opinion, two in particular. One being the tongue attacks. It has the same quality as Fuoku's overhead slam, coming out so quickly after any punishable attack that you basically have to gamble for every hit you get in. Also, saying he loves to spam it would be an understatement, as he'll often use his tongue combo twice or even 3 times in a row. And if you take 2 tongue hits, that decay really takes the wind out of your sails. The other problem I have is how difficult it is to hit his Guy form. While he's in Guy form, you're best off just keeping your distance and minimizing the blocking you have to do until he transitions back into dog form, since 80% of your punishes on his Guy form will just whiff, even if you've got a long-ass weapon like the Booster Glaive. That all being said, I do like the fight a lot. It's fun to block and punish as long as it doesn't show you what that tongue do, and the design is definitely standout. As an ending note, I fought this guy for the first time post-nerf, so the post-nerf version is the one I'm judging. Same with King of Puppets. This is not a very satisfying potential last boss. I never fought this guy pre-nerf, so I don't know if he was overtuned before, but I can definitely say they overcorrected. He's extremely underwhelming. This was the boss that took me the second least amount of tries on my first playthrough, which is not really what you want from a final boss, but difficulty aside, I actually do like the fight a lot. Learning the parry timings on the first phase's attacks is enjoyable, and the only attack I'm not a fan of is the Whirlpool, which just encourages you to walk away until it's finished with his string and the pool disappears. Second phase does a spellcaster boss fairly well, all things considered. There isn't really a particular attack from this phase that makes me pissed off when I see it come out, which is pretty difficult to do when designing a boss like this. Though, I think tacking Deathblight onto the spells was a little unnecessary. I was also a little annoyed with the nuke until I realized it wasn't arena-wide and you just had to you know, walk away. I was frankly expecting a third phase on this guy, but that might just be due to the over-nerfing that took place. Still a pretty solid fight, if not necessarily final boss material. I mostly just wish he was a little harder, so I had to spend a little longer learning him, phase 1 in particular. This guy's a nice little mid-game treat. Learning the timings on this guy felt just the right amount of difficult, and I felt very rewarded when I started being able to reliably parry his entire main combo and all of his fury attacks. And his second phase was a nice throwback to a previous banger boss with some extra sauce on top. I actually really enjoyed the feeling of the second phase as well as the infested enemies as a whole, because they really do feel like they're two different beings attacking you from one body. Don't like his burrow attack though. Slows the fight down and just isn't very fun to deal with. This is a very enjoyable basic fight. The only real complaint I would have is that it's kinda underwhelming for a secret final boss. To be honest, the first time I took out phase 2, I was fully expecting it to be a 3-phase fight. I was very surprised when it just ended there. I was expecting the last fight to be against, Geppetto, Architect of Destruction, or some nerdy ass shit like that. Not just some weird doll your dad made, in case he had to have his robot son Vessel guy killed, I don't know. He didn't even give it a name like Obelisk the Destroyer or something. Also, it has Varian Rin's sword for no reason. There's probably deeper lore there, but my ass isn't going to read every item description in the game to eventually find out that the description on some random throwable object says that the puppet is made out of his dead wife or something. Anyway, not too much to say about this. It's just a well-made, basic fight. This boss absolutely slaps, and it was placed in the perfect spot. As mentioned in the intro, I was pretty negative on this game on my first playthrough, and if this boss wasn't so well made, it's fairly likely I would have quit the year. Scrapped Watchman does absolutely everything it needs to. It's not overly punishing, and it has very predictable attack patterns for you to practice parrying on, including a very simple fury attack which rewards you beautifully with a huge punish window on a successful parry. His phase 2 also throws in some curveballs that are very conducive to the player's learning, like a simple grab that lets the player know, hey, you can't just handle everything with the left bumper, and some non-intrusive ground effects on his usually easily punishable 3-hit combo that makes you just get a bit more creative if you want to get your damage in. Scrapped Watchman is nothing short of a masterclass in early game Souls-like boss design. This guy prepares you well for the rest of the game moving forward, all while being a solid boss in and of itself. This boss scratches my Souls-like itch like nothing else in this game. He's just what I love in a boss. You, a giant beefcake, and a fair but punishing set of attacks to learn. There's not a single attack in this fight that makes me think, damn, that's a little ridiculous compared to everything else, which is something I'm really not into in Souls-like bosses that some bosses in this game embody. You're always on your toes in this fight, and you're rewarded well for getting the parry timings on his strings down with frequent staggers and easy punishes. He's also the first boss with a fake-out attack when you stagger him, which is a mechanic from this game that I do enjoy, making you be a little more careful even when you have the upper hand and giving even more damage potential to the creative player. There's not really much else to say about this guy, which is a good thing in my mind. Everything he does is, like I said, and like many people like to describe the Soul games, hard but fair. Very, very well done, boss. Not my favorite, though. That's up next, obviously. This fight is basically perfect. If Victor is the best Souls boss in this game, then Laxasia is the best Lies of P boss. This fight feels like one of the only ones where they really leaned into what makes this game's combat unique, and did it perfectly. Every attack is fair, punishing on failure, and rewarding on success. Different attacks are best dealt with in different ways. Sometimes you dodge, sometimes you parry, sometimes you outspace. Not only are you rewarded for learning, but you're rewarded in ways that only Lies of P can do so. Breaking her weapon in Phase 1 skips it, sending you right into Phase 2. Parrying her lightning attacks in Phase 2 send them back at her and deal damage. As a side note, with how creative this game can be, I was surprised to learn that Laxasia was As far as I can tell, one of the only fights that rewards you in special ways for parries. The only other one I could tell that did this was, oddly enough, the rabbits, where parrying 2 hits in any of their combos would force them to end prematurely, which is actually a punishment, as it turns them to a neutral state immediately, which is followed with another attack or a dodge away, taking away your punish window. Anyway, let's not let that pubic lice infestation of a fight ruin gushing over a beautiful one like this. Though there's not much more to say. The fight is a carefully crafted, perfectly balanced, please don't nerf this fight, please, 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 wonderful spectacle of a Souls fight. If you're watching this, I urge you not to slurp at the easy mode fountain for Laxasia. I urge anyone playing Lies of P to ignore the ass cracks calling as a whole, as it really does diminish the entire experience. But for Laxasia in particular, well, I've seen people fight her with specters, and it basically rips out everything that makes this fight special. It elicited the same reaction in me as those images that show a majestic wolf next to a genetic abomination like a pug or a chihuahua that their descendants were twisted into by thousands of years of human interference. And that's that. I genuinely mean it when I say this game probably has a stronger lineup of bosses than any of the Soulsborne Karo rings. And it's complemented by an extremely competent, satisfying combat system. I do think there are things this game fell flat on its face on, quite frankly, which I might discuss in other videos if folks are interested. But I knew the bosses were the first thing I wanted to cover on this game. The Souls-likes have a focus on their bosses after all, and Lies of P even more so. Like I said, I'm waiting with bated breath for this game's DLC, and I really hope its boss game is as strong as the base games. Well, that's that done. Feel free to discuss in the comments, and please remember to like so I know you enjoyed this video, and subscribe so you know when more comes out. Farewell.